Before the end of May 2026, you will receive a sign, not like a bolt of lightning, not like a dramatic event that changes everything at once. A clear sign, the kind that needs no explanation, that you can't pretend you didn't feel, that arrives with that quality of something inevitable that you, deep down, were already expecting. But here's what nobody is saying about this sign. Libra has an extraordinary ability to perceive signs. You read what people don't say. You sense when an environment is wrong before anyone names it. You pick up frequencies that most people don't even know exist. This ability is real, it's impressive, and for years it has been used almost exclusively to calibrate the emotional field of others. And fate kept sending its signs anyway. In the midst of the confusion, in the midst of other people's demands, in the midst of conversations about other things, and you, busy reading everyone around you, sometimes let your own signal slip by. Until now. Because what's coming before the end of May isn't just a new sign. It's the moment when Libra finally stops pointing its own perception outward and starts using it inward. And when that happens, everything that seemed like coincidence begins to make different sense. The pieces fall into place. The lock finds the key. By the end of this video, you'll understand what's coming and why, this time, you won't let it pass you by. There's a kind of waiting that no one teaches you to name. It's not anxiety. It's not haste. It's that low, constant feeling that something is organizing itself somewhere beyond your reach, and that at some point, that something will knock on your door with a clarity that will leave no room for doubt. Libra knows this feeling very well, better than they'd like to admit. Most people, when they think of Libra waiting, imagine elegance, refined patience, someone who knows that balance always returns, who feels before acting, who has that kind of quiet wisdom that makes others say, "You're so calm, how do you manage?" But there's a part of this waiting that no one sees, a part that happens in Libra's inner workings, far from anyone's eyes. And it's precisely this part that needs to be named before anything else. Inside, Libra isn't just waiting, it's observing. It's reading the environment with an attention that rarely falters. Every person around, every shift in energy, every subtle detail the context emits. And while doing this, while decoding the world with that almost silent precision, there's a question that always lingers in the background, a question Libra constantly postpones, without realizing it's postponing, day after day. What does all this mean for me? Not for the situation, not for the other person, for me. This distinction may seem small, but it is central to everything that will be discussed here. There's a pattern that repeats itself in Libra over the years, and it only becomes visible when you truly stop to look at yourself. It's the pattern of someone with an extraordinary ability to perceive signs, but who almost always uses that ability for the benefit of others. You sense when someone is unwell before they say a word. You sense when an environment is wrong before someone names it. You perceive tones, nuances, undertones, things that most people don't even register. But when the time comes to apply that same perception to your own life, something hesitates. Something within Libra takes a step back and says, "It's not time yet." It's as if there's an unwritten internal rule. First, take care of the balance around you. Then, if there's enough clarity left, take care of what's yours. First, read the emotional state of everyone around you. Then, if there's time, read your own. And destiny, whatever you want to call that force that orchestrates coincidences into something that seems inevitable, destiny doesn't wait for the balance around us to be resolved before sending its signals. It sends them anyway. In the midst of the confusion, in the midst of other people's demands, in the middle of a conversation about something completely different. Libra, busy reading the emotional field of everyone around them, sometimes misses their own signal without realizing it, without even registering that there was a signal there. But here's what needs to be said before anything else. This is not a flaw. It's not a Libra defect. It's a direct consequence of something that is, at the same time, one of this sign's greatest gifts and one of the greatest obstacles it silently carries. Before the end of May 2026, this obstacle will appear in a way that will be impossible to ignore. And the sign that's coming, clear, direct, almost impossible to misinterpret, will arrive precisely at the moment when Libra finally begins to point its own perception inward, not just outward. But why now? Why May? And how will you recognize when it arrives that this is the sign, and not just another coincidence to be catalogued and saved for later? It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book, The Divine Path, that guides your zodiac sign to a life of purpose. It's not a book about waiting for signs from the universe. It's a book about learning to receive what is already being sent, about developing the ability to read your own life with the same precision that Libra uses to read the lives of others. For a sign that has spent so much time calibrating the emotional field around it, this is not an obvious lesson. It's a profound realignment. You are now in a specific inner place. The question remains open. The discomfort is active. And this state of heightened perception, of clarity that is arriving but hasn't yet landed, is precisely when this material has the most impact. Not tomorrow, not when you feel more ready. Now, while the perception is still alive and the signal is still approaching. The link is in the first pinned comment. But be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. And since you're here, think of a situation in your life where you clearly felt something, an inner certainty, a discomfort that wouldn't go away. But you waited so long to act that when you finally did, the moment had already changed. Tell us in the comments what prevented you from trusting what you already knew. There's a specific grammar to the signs that arrive for Libra. It doesn't resemble cosmic thunder or dramatic visions. It resembles dissonance, something that slightly bothers you. A phrase that lingers in your head long after the conversation is over. A feeling that a place or situation no longer makes sense the way it once did. A beauty that suddenly hurts a little because you instinctively know it's passing. These are the signs, not the big ones, not the loud ones. The ones that arrive quietly and wait for you to stop long enough to notice them. Imagine an experienced musician playing live. At some point in the performance, a note is slightly out of tune. He doesn't stop. He doesn't announce it to the audience. He simply feels it. And this internal, immediate, almost unconscious registration is how he knows something needs adjusting. It is precisely this quality of perception that Libra possesses naturally. The ability to register dissonance before it becomes evident to anyone else. The problem isn't perception, it never has been. The problem is that Libra has trained over the years to use this ability almost exclusively in service of harmony around them. When dissonance appears, Libra's first reaction is to check if it's the environment that needs adjusting, if someone is suffering, if it's a relationship that needs care or balance. Rarely is the first question. What if this dissonance is telling me something about my own path? What if this discomfort isn't a problem to solve for others, but a message directed specifically at me? It's a language that Libra speaks fluently, with a fluency that others admire, that others seek, that others depend on, but that has almost never been used to read their own text. Like someone who has spent years translating entire works into other languages and suddenly realizes they have an entire story inside them that has never been written, what their characters are waiting for, that the plot is developed, but that the person never sat down to put it on paper because they were always busy with the work of others. Before the end of May 2026, the universe will create a pause in this continuous translation. A pause long enough for Libra to look inward and recognize the language of its own destiny. And when that pause arrives, the question that will arise won't be philosophical. It will be very concrete. What is this specific dissonance, this discomfort that won't go away, telling me about where I need to go from here? The answer, when it comes, will be simpler than Libra expected. Because when you're listening at the right frequency, the message doesn't need to shout to be understood. There's a phenomenon that happens to Libra at certain times that few can clearly name. It's not a crisis. It's not a dramatic rupture. It's a convergence. A specific moment when the surrounding energy field briefly stops pulling Libra in 1,000 directions at once. Demands lessen somewhat, relationships enter a quieter rhythm, yesterday's urgencies lose some of their intensity. And there, in that space that opens up, sometimes for hours, sometimes for a few days, Libra finally manages to clearly hear what it has always been trying to tell itself. The end of May 2026 is one of those moments, and not in a gentle or gradual way, in a concentrated way, like a tide that has been accumulating for months and arrives in a single movement that redefines the contours of the beach. Have you ever been on a beach when the tide came in higher than expected? There's a quality of inevitability to it. The water doesn't ask if it's convenient. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. It simply arrives, and what was buried in the sand appears. What was hidden becomes visible, and what you thought was the permanent outline of that place changes in a way that can't be undone, because the beach after the tide is a different beach with a different memory. The sign that Libra will receive before the end of May has this quality. It won't be an invitation to reflect for months before deciding. It will be a moment of clarity that simply happens, and that demands, not tomorrow, but now, an answer. The question that remains, the one that will continue to be present as the next chapter of this story unfolds, is this. When that tide comes in, when that space of convergence opens up, will you know where to look? Here's what nobody talks about regarding the May convergence. It's not enough to be in the right place at the right time. You need to have your eyes open to what the tide is bringing, not what you expected it to bring. That's the difference between Libra receiving the signal and Libra letting the signal pass by again. The divine path that guides your zodiac sign towards a life of purpose addresses precisely this blind spot, the distance between perception and reception, between feeling that something has arrived and actually letting it shift the axis of your life. For Libra, this distance is often greater than it seems. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. But what to say when that moment arrives, and instead of receiving the signal with openness, Libra feels an unexpected weight. It's not simple resistance. It's not stubbornness. It's something more sophisticated and more silent. An inner voice that says, "I haven't finished preparing yet. I'm not ready enough yet. There's still something I need to resolve, balance, conclude, before I deserve this clarity." This voice is not weakness. It is one of the most curious and profound architectural features of Libra psychology, and it deserves to be understood before it is simply ignored. It's not a fear of failure. Libra has a complex but functional relationship with failure. They know it's part of the process. They know how to rebalance after a stumble. What Libra often feels, but rarely names, is something different. A fear of succeeding before being complete, as if receiving the signal now before having resolved all emotional issues, all the relationships that still need care, all the parts of themselves that are still in process, as if that were a betrayal of the very standard of integrity that Libra has built over the years. There's a map some people carry in their pocket for years without opening it, not because they don't want to get somewhere, but because as long as the map remains folded, the possibility is still intact. All routes still exist. No choice has yet eliminated any other, and there's a quality of comfort in that state, in that place between what could be and what will be, that Libra knows very well. Libra has a deep and silent relationship with possibility, with the space between options, with that quiet place where no choice has yet been made and everything is still possible. It is in this place that Libra often feels safest, not because they fear destiny, but because the chosen destiny is permanent in a way that waiting never is. And permanence is frightening when you're not yet sure that what you want now is exactly what you'll want later. But here's what May will make clear. The clarity of destiny doesn't wait for you to resolve all the other chapters of your life before it arrives. It arrives when it arrives. And the question isn't whether you're ready. The question is whether you'll let clarity land, or whether you'll tuck it away in your pocket once more, carefully folded, for a more convenient moment that will probably never come. What this period will bring to the forefront for Libra is not a choice between right and wrong. It is a choice between the version of oneself that exists for the sake of others' balance and the version of oneself that knows and inhabits one's own center. And accepting the sign necessarily means letting go of the first. The signal doesn't arrive with fanfare. It doesn't arrive announced. It arrives like a click, that specific sound of a lock finding its place after a long search. A sound you only recognize because, somewhere deep down, you knew you were waiting for it. But also a sound that once heard cannot be undone, because now you know. And knowing changes how you look at everything that came before. For Libra, this click has a very particular characteristic. It doesn't come from the outside. It's not news, an external revelation, a dramatic event that redefines everything overnight. It comes from within. It's a perception that settles in, silently, without drama, almost without ceremony, and that suddenly makes a situation you were seeing from a certain angle make sense from a completely different angle. Not because the world has changed, because you've changed the way you position yourself in relation to it. Before the end of May 2026, this click will happen. I'm not talking about a vague astrological possibility. I'm talking about a convergence of elements, internal and external, personal and cosmic, that will create the conditions for Libra's perception to realign with its own destiny in a way that cannot be ignored indefinitely. The sign might come in a seemingly ordinary conversation. It might come in a moment of silence, at a time when you are finally alone with your own thoughts. It might come in an unplanned encounter, in a detail of daily life that suddenly carries a symbolic weight it never had before. But when it comes, you will know, not because you will have immediate absolute certainty, but because the discomfort of not acting will be greater than the discomfort of accepting it. And it is precisely at this moment, between recognition and action, that there is a very specific window in which the difference between moving forward and retreating is small, but decisive. That click that was just described, that moment when the lock finally finds its fit, doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens when you already have an internal structure that knows how to recognize and receive it. And that's why the divine path that guides your zodiac sign towards a life of purpose exists, not to announce that the sign is coming, but to prepare Libra to receive it without recoiling, without reinterpreting, without immediately transforming it into something useful for others. The signal for May is yours. The next step is yours too. And the tools to take that step are in this digital book. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. And then, after the signal, what happens? This is the question that most content about astrology and destiny never truly answers. They describe the sign. They celebrate the arrival of clarity. They announce the potential of the moment. But they rarely talk about what comes next. The ordinary life that continues, now with a different axis, with a different inaugural question, with a different relationship between what you need and what you offer. For Libra, receiving the sign is not the end of a cycle. It is the beginning of a different stance in the world. A stance in which the scales, that symbol so heavily laden and so often misinterpreted by this sign, finally stop adjusting to external weight and find their own point of equilibrium. Not the perfect static equilibrium that Libra sometimes pursues, as if it were a state to be achieved and maintained forever, immune to life's variations, but a living equilibrium, one that oscillates, that adjusts, that changes as life changes, but that always returns to its own center, because the center is now known. There is a huge difference between a scale that balances two external weights and a scale that knows its own resting point. The first needs external references to function. It is always responding, always reacting, always calibrated according to what is outside. The second works from within. It still receives external influences. It still feels the weight of relationships, demands and changes around it. But it does not depend on these influences to know where its center is. This transition is what the sign of May will initiate in Libra, not all at once, not magically, but in a real, concrete, and most importantly, irreversible way. What will change in practice is the sequence of questions. Instead of what is best for the balance of everything around us, the first question will be, what does this mean for me? And only then, with clear awareness and intention, will you consider the impact on those around you. This inversion seems simple when written like this, but for Libra, it's a silent revolution. It's the difference between living from one's own center and living for the harmony that others need. You will look back, perhaps in a few months, perhaps in a year, and you will be able to clearly identify the before and after. You will be able to name the exact moment when something within you permanently repositioned itself, and you will recognize with that specific serenity that Libra possesses when it finally arrives at its true place, that the sign was right. That destiny knew what it was doing, and that you, by ceasing to translate the world for others and beginning to read your own map, finally received what was always yours. Libra's nature isn't to be a perfectly balanced scale. It's to be a scale that knows how to find balance, even when everything around it is oscillating, even when the demands are great, even when external pressures try to redefine where the center is. Libra's true balance isn't the absence of weight. It's the ability to carry weight without losing its axis. And the sign that is arriving before the end of May 2026 is not an instruction. It is not a command. It is an invitation for Libra to stop being the point of balance for everything around it and finally become the point of balance for itself. So that the scale that you are, with all your sensitivity, with all your extraordinary perception, with all your ability to read what others cannot see, begins to function primarily in your own service. The sign is coming, before the end of May, with the clarity of someone who doesn't need to shout to be heard. And you, who have always known how to read the frequencies that others miss, will recognize it, because that is your deepest nature. Not the nature of someone who waits, the nature of someone who, when the right time comes, finally knows how to receive.